Chapter 2 is going to be on solving linear equations, and for these two, or for this lesson, I'm going to combine 2.1 and 2.2 kind of just into one lesson. So like I said, throughout the entire Chapter 2, we're going to be solving equations. The types of equations that we're going to be talking about are what we call linear equations in one variable. Okay, the word linear refers to the graph of this equation, which is something that we'll talk about when we get to intermediate, and also it refers to the exponents that are in the equation. So this is what we call a linear equation in one variable. This is what I call standard form. A, B, and C just represent numbers. So this could be something like 2x plus 4 is equal to negative 6. So A would be 2, B would be 4, C would be negative 6. Okay, if you notice the variable that I have, x, the understood exponent is a 1. Okay, any type of equation that has an exponent of 1 is what we call linear. Now this is not the only form that these equations can take. It could be something like 5x plus 1 equals negative 2x plus 4. Okay, this is also a linear equation because the exponents are both just 1s. And the reason that we say in one variable really means that it's in one kind of variable. Like I have two variable terms, but they're both the same. They're both x's. So if this were an x and this were a y, this would not be a linear equation in one variable. Okay, so that part just means that it has to be the same variable in the equation. Now, some of the equations you can look at and you can just tell what the solution would be. Okay, some of them you could not. Like these two, you probably couldn't just say, well, I know what the value of x is. You're going to have to use a little bit of algebra to get to that value. Okay, if you had something like x plus 3 is equal to 10, well, this one I can kind of look at it because this means some unknown number x plus 3 is equal to 10. Well, what number can I add to 3 and get 10? Well, we know the only solution would be 7 because 7 plus 3 is equal to 10. Okay, so that means 7 is our solution. Okay, and by definition we say that the solution is the number that makes the equation true. The solution is the number that makes the equation true. So if I were to simplify this on out, I would get 10 is equal to 10, and which is a true statement. So then that verifies, excuse me, that verifies that 7 is the solution to this equation. Okay, so like I said before, we're going to go through a series of algebraic steps that will help us find the solution for equations that we can't just look at and tell. Okay, so number 2 says solving linear equations, and it says steps for solving. Okay, the steps that I'm going to give you are just kind of in my own words, how I would say it, to you, how I would paraphrase it. And you won't use these for every single problem. Okay, the problems are going to be different, so it's just going to depend, on each individual problem. But the steps I'm going to give you, you can use these for all the problems. It kind of just gives you a starting point. Okay, so let's get started. First step that I'm going to say is to remove any fractions that you may have in the problem. Okay, so see, they're not all going to have fractions, so you won't have to do this every time. Okay, so I just say remove any fractions, and you do this by multiplying by a common denominator. And I will show you an example of this in a future lesson. Multiply by a common denominator. The ones that we look at today are not going to have any fractions in them. Okay, but they're coming, so that's why I put this in. So first thing, if you see fractions, is that we're going to get rid of those. Step 2, you want to clear any parentheses. And again, your problem may not have parentheses, so this is one of those steps that you may not have to do every time. So how do we clear parentheses? If you remember from chapter 1, hopefully, that is by distributing. So we use the distributive property. Step 3 is going to be to simplify each side of the equation. Okay, and by simplify, this is what I mean. If you have like terms that are on the same side of the equal sign, then you want to combine those. So I'm just going to put combine like terms. And that's if they're on the same side of the equal sign. Okay, so these 3 steps really are going to be kind of specific to the problem. Okay, you may not have to do these every time. Alright, step number 4 is the one that you probably will be using the most. Okay, this one is using what we call in algebra is using the addition property. Now the addition property tells us that we can add or subtract the same number from both sides of the equal sign, and it's not going to change our equation. Okay, so in my words, the addition property allows us to move all variable terms to one side of the equation, move all variable terms to one side of the equation, and all numbers, and remember these numbers are sometimes called constants, so I'm going to put that in parentheses, move all your numbers or your constants to the other side. Now typically I like to move the variables to the left, numbers to the right, but you don't have to do it that way. You just want to work it out so that you have variables on one side equal to numbers, equal to constants. Okay. Then step number 5 is going to be to divide by the coefficient of the variable if it's not a 1. Okay, divide by the coefficient of the variable if it's not a 1. What does the word coefficient mean? We talked about this before. It's the number that's in front of the variable. Okay, so if I have something like 2x, then that means I would divide by that number 2. Okay, if it's a 1x, we don't have to divide. Okay, that's why I say if it's not a 1, then you divide. If it is, then you're finished. Okay, and then last step is going to be to check your solutions. So I wanted you to have this list of steps just kind of in front of you, okay, laid out in front of you, that you can use for all of the problems that we're going to talk about. So the examples are on the next part.